This daily dose is brought to you by Pirate.Black. ARRR.
Is it possible to have privacy in 2024? And I want to make this distinction between privacy and being anonymous, because I think I've heard you mention there's a difference in the past, and I'd like to get your take on that. So can I be anonymous? Can I be private? But let's focus on privacy. So over to you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think actually a deep question, right? You could write a PhD thesis just on this topic, alone. I think maybe the best way to answer this question is to, go back to a quote from a person that we all know loves privacy so much. Mark Zuckerberg, right? Back in the early 2010s, he had a famous quote where he said, privacy is no longer a social norm, right? Yeah. And actually, objectively speaking, he was probably correct. As much as we despise that statement, he was right. People have gone to social media; they were sharing. It was now the sharing economy. It was kind of a different world. And then he goes on his Facebook page and he makes a post, right? And the post basically says, if I were to summarize it in one sentence, it was, privacy is at the heart of all we do at Facebook. Right. So, of course, no one believed it, right? And you shouldn't believe it. But I think what that really shows is you have somebody that completely doesn't believe in privacy, thinks this is gone. And then within a span of 7-8 years, he's done a complete 180. He turned it completely around. So what happened, right? What happened in those 7-8 years? Why did this multi-billionaire suddenly change his mind? And I think what changed his mind was consumers. People like you and me, other people who are watching, this channel, people started thinking, I'm not comfortable with what Facebook is doing with my data. So Mark changed his mind. Zuck changed his mind not because, he loves privacy or because, he suddenly decided to grow some moral qualms about what he's doing, right? He changed his mind because in a capitalist economy, consumers are the most powerful force. And when consumer attitudes change, he has no choice. And so to go to the question of, does privacy exist? I think the answer actually is privacy exists if we want it to exist. Because if we as individuals, as society, say that privacy is required and we demand that, actually the big tech companies, no matter how big they are, who are servicing us, will have no choice but to bend to our will. So, so this is why I'm optimistic, right? Yeah, so I think that's the answer to that one, and then I can get into privacy and anonymity afterwards.
Yeah, I've got to say I'm going to be pessimistic because I've heard you say things about Apple and other companies as well, but you go for it, and then we'll come back to that.
So yeah, let's talk about privacy and anonymity because this is a very, very important topic as well. Yeah. From the legalistic perspective first, privacy. This is a right that is enshrined by law. Almost any company, any country you go to has, a privacy law, right? Switzerland, it's actually in the UN, Declaration of Human Rights. But anonymity is something that actually is never really protected by law. So in some sense, from a legal standpoint, you have a right to privacy, but you don't have a right to anonymity, not at least by default, right? So there's a legal difference. But let's talk about, what it takes. Well, privacy is kind of an expectation that you sort of have when you give data online. It's something that you sort of expect all services to deliver for you. And in many cases, they're obligated to do so. But being anonymous, this is not something that I would say most services provide. And being anonymous is also something that requires proactive action on your side, right? Being anonymous is very difficult. It's where you're seeing what services you're using, how you're hiding your IP address, how you're paying for things, It's actually almost a lifestyle that encompasses all areas of your life. So privacy, you can kind of get almost by default if tech companies are responsible, but anonymity is something you need to actively pursue and seek and defend yourself. And that makes it a much higher hurdle, to climb. And I think that's actually the difference, right? It's that, there's, of course, a legal distinction, but there's also a distinction in terms of the effort involved and, your responsibility towards it, right? I would say privacy maybe is a responsibility of, if not the government, the tech companies that are out there servicing you, right? Whereas anonymity, that's a personal responsibility, actually.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning because there'll be people watching this, different stages. Some people, let's start with the most basic argument, and then we'll go like really hardcore, technical, perhaps. I don't care that the government is watching me because I've got nothing to hide is something that people often say, like, I've got nothing to hide, so why do I care?
Well, each time someone tells me that, what I ask them is, okay, if you have nothing to hide, would you mind giving me your email password? And and in the past 10 years, I haven't had a single taker, right? So clearly they do have something to hide. And I think, so I think that's why there's a policy there. Because as much as you say, I've got nothing to hide, at the end of the day, I think privacy is innate to being human. It's the reason we have curtains on our windows, locks on our doors. It's the reason you close the door, hopefully, when you go to the restroom, right? I think being human means having a need for privacy. And you cannot really separate the two. So even the ones who say they have nothing to hide is simply not true.
I mean, the other concern is, okay, let's say I think, okay, I want to be private, but, it's impossible because, it means I have to get rid of Google. There's no alternative. Or I have to get rid of Facebook. There's no alternative. So what do you say to that? And then I want to get to government overreach, perhaps.
I would say there's a spectrum. I think being someone that cares about privacy doesn't mean that you don't go on social network, right? Being a private person doesn't mean that you're a hermit living out in the woods, camping it off the grid. And the important thing to keep in mind is privacy really is a spectrum, because in our life there are certain things we want to make public, certain things that we're very happy to share, and there's also certain things that we want to keep to ourselves.
Follow the treasure to pirate.black, because financial privacy today is freedom tomorrow. ARRR!